Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with paper pork. That's right, I'm very excited to show you this new method I've been using for roasting pork shoulder. And while the results I've been getting are very impressive, there is one small problem. I'm not actually sure if the paper I'm using in this technique is doing anything or not. I mean, I think it is, and it seems like it is, and it feels like it is. But to be completely honest, if it is, I'm not sure exactly why. Although I do have a theory, which I will share later. But for now, let's just go ahead and get started. And we will begin with a very simple dry rub. So to a generous amount of kosher salt, we will add some freshly ground black pepper, as well as some smoked paprika, and then we'll also add some garlic powder and onion powder. No, not onion salt and garlic salt. That is just pure granulated onion and garlic. And then we'll finish up with a nice big spoon of cayenne for some heat, which we will then balance with some brown sugar for some sweet. And that is going to be it for our dry rub. So we will give that a mix. And once that's set, we can move on and apply it to our pork shoulder. And there it is. We have a 7-pound bone-in pork shoulder, also known as pork butt. It's a long story. And yes, that bone you can see on the side there is the shoulder blade. And what we need to do here is coat that meat thoroughly and evenly, including, of course, any nooks and crannies. And this is probably a great time to mention this is not a recipe, it's actually a techniques video. So even though I showed you the dry rub I'm going to use, this really will work with any one you want. You are the Eric holder of your pork shoulder, so it's going to be up to you to decide which spice rub will do this justice. But anyway, no matter what you end up using, we will apply that rub to our meat, and then once that's been accomplished, we can move on to the wrapping in paper part of the program. And not just any paper. We're going to need some parchment paper, which is what I have right here. And what we'll want to do is cut off a nice long piece, probably 4 feet or more, and we will place our pork down and basically just roll it up. And we're actually going to do 2 layers of paper. And it's not going to matter as much for the second piece, but for this first wrapping, try to get it nice and tight. Okay, we want this paper pressed up nice and tight against that meat. So we'll go ahead and roll and wrap our pork in that first piece of paper. And then, like I said, we're going to wrap that again in a second piece. So we'll place our pork down, turn this way, and we'll wrap that up. And because parchment paper is kind of slippery, it's going to be tougher to get this one really tight, but don't worry about it, because we're going to encase this all in foil. So just wrap it up as tightly and neatly as you can. Oh, by the way, when you're shopping for your parchment paper, what you're looking for is something that's all natural and not bleached. So yes, they do sell white-colored parchment paper that's been bleached first. But I'm not sure why you'd want to introduce something that's been bleached when you don't have to. And besides, this stuff looks like butcher paper, which I feel at the end is going to give us a more authentic and meaty presentation. And then once we're set with that, we can go ahead and start wrapping this in foil. And just like the first piece of parchment paper, try to wrap this first layer of foil as tight as you can. Okay, so make sure you're giving it the old tuck and squeeze as you go. And once we have that wrapped in that first piece of foil as shown, we will wrap it up in a second piece, but we will lay our pork the other direction. And by the way, I do recommend using heavy-duty foil for this. I'm not sure exactly when they started making regular foil so thin, but you can tear that stuff just by looking at it wrong. So I do generally use heavy-duty for pretty much everything. And then to finish this off, we will wrap it in a third piece of foil. And yes, unfortunately, there's more wrapping footage than there is things to talk about. So I apologize I don't have any more interesting filler. I guess I could try a joke. So this horse walks into a bar, and the bartender looks at him and says, "Hey, why the long face?" I guess we could have just had silence. But anyway, we will mercifully finish up the wrapping, and we'll go ahead and transfer that into some kind of roasting pan. And by the way, no matter how you place this in here, a little bit of fat and or juice is going to leak out. But having said that, I do like to have any seams on the top, or at least facing up. And at that point, what we're calling paper pork is ready for the oven. So what we'll do is transfer this into the center of a 225-degree oven for exactly 1 3/4 hours per pound, which for me ended up being a total of 12.5 hours. So I'll generally start this late at night, so it's ready the next afternoon. And after roasting in that nice slow oven for about 12.5 hours, this is what mine looked like. And as you can see, we did have a little bit of leakage, but barely enough to mention. And then what we'll want to do as soon as that comes out is nothing. For at least an hour, don't do anything. Just let it sit there. Yes, if you have a wicked case of the munchies, you can unwrap this and eat it immediately. But I think if you let it sit, those juices are going to redistribute. And I think it'll be a little nicer, and it should still be pretty hot. So I did let mine sit for about an hour before painstakingly unwrapping. And please be careful if you're doing this hot. There is definitely going to be some fat and juices between those layers. Oh, by the way, when I mentioned at the beginning that I wasn't sure exactly why this worked, but I had a theory, what I think might be happening here is that paper kind of forms a membrane, which sort of insulates the pork because paper is not a very good conductor of heat. And I believe that provides a very nice, moist, gentle cooking environment. In fact, the earliest form of barbecue is actually meat covered in wet leaves, set over a fire. So who knows, maybe we're actually simulating that, or not. All I know is this comes out amazingly moist and very, very succulent. And please note, even though we cooked this for 12.5 hours, it has not collapsed down into a pile of dry, overcooked meat. It actually looks more like a pork roast. But check this out. Here's how you can usually tell you're dealing with a perfectly cooked pork shoulder. If we can pull that shoulder blade bone out like this, and it comes out easily and clean and glistening with moisture, that is perfect. So that's what we're going to shoot for. And since I've already broken this open, I might as well grab a fork and go in for a taste. Which really was extraordinary. Just wonderfully moist and soft and tender without being mushy. And as you'll notice, the nice thing about pork shoulders, you can actually eat a little bit and put it back together and your guests will never know. And then as far as presentation goes for this, what I like to do is transfer it into some kind of serving platter with the paper, which I think not only makes for a provocative and very enticing presentation, but it's also going to trap in and hold those natural cooking juices, which we can brush over to make everything look nice and moist and shiny. And obviously, if you're going to use this stuff for pulled pork sandwiches, which you really should, you will of course mix most, if not all, those juices back in. But anyway, we'll brush a little of that jus over the top, and then finish up with a little bit of green onion for the pictures. And that's it, our paper pork is done, and ready to enjoy in so many delicious ways. And I'll be finishing up this video by showing you my favorite, which is simply just broken up or cut up or shredded up and piled up on a roll with your favorite barbecue sauce. And if you notice, I do break it or cut it up into smaller pieces, but I don't like to shred it or mash it down to a paste. I do prefer some identifiable pieces of meat involved. So we'll go ahead and pile that up on a definitely not homemade roll and finish up with a little bit of barbecue sauce. I know it doesn't look like barbecue sauce, but it is. That's a little something I call see-through barbecue sauce, which is my take on a North Carolina hot pepper vinegar style sauce, which many people are saying I might demo next week. So stay tuned for that. Whoops, lost a little piece. Don't worry, I'll eat that little piece when I change the camera angle. There we go. But anyway, that's it. Paper pork. Whether you're going to use it in a sandwich like this, or simply on a plate with some fabulous fixins, I really do hope you give this incredible technique a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.